Terror in New England as towns across Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Massachusetts are rocked by the gruesome discovery of several sets of remains in various stages of decomposition. Residents fear a serial killer is on the loose, living amongst them.
The so-called New England serial killer. While authorities insist there's no such thing, that doesn't seem to allay the fears of residents across the region. Joining me now to look into the mind of serial killers to determine what clues, if any, have been left behind is renowned therapist, psychologist Caryn Stark. You can hear her on radio. You can hear her on TV. Caryn Stark, thank you for being with us. Caryn, people are fascinated with the minds of serial killers. Now, for the state's purposes, of course, the state never has to prove motive or what a serial killer is thinking. Why would we have to go into their minds like going in a dusty, old, dingy, moldy attic and try to find relics of the past? No. However, jurors like to hear it. They want to understand what's happening. So, at first blush, what goes on in the mind of a serial killer? Many of them have been shown to be very intelligent. They have to know what the consequences would be if they are found out. I mean, here's a great example. Rex Heuermann. He is an accomplished architect. He's got his own business, a family. He's done really well in a dog-eat-dog society, and that's in Manhattan. There's a million architects, but he's made it. Look at him in all of his finery right there along Wall Street. So he has to know that what he is doing is wrong, and he has to know the consequences if he is found out, Caryn Stark, but yet they do it anyway, Caryn.
It's an obsession, Nancy. They have to keep going. They have to fulfill their fantasy. Think of it this way. They've been thinking about this for a very long time. So in their mind, they have an outline of a house, and then they start to construct it. And then, in fact, they need to build it. In other words, they need to go out and act upon their fantasy. And he's a great example because he was in his basement conjuring this up. And they also have a low threshold of excitement. So, for instance, we're eating a meal. It makes us feel really great. We love the food. We go out, we see a movie. That doesn't work for serial killers. And he's a good example because he needs more and more escalation in order to feel excited.
Okay, what does that mean? How much more can you escalate targeting your victim, stalking your victim, tricking your victim, getting her into your underground sex dungeon lair? And from what we can tell, Heuermann would keep his victims alive for days, quote, playing, his words not mine, with them while his wife and children were away. You're seeing shots of some of his victims, alleged victims, he hasn't gone to trial yet, right now. I mean, this was almost like a game for him, Caryn Stark. So what do you mean escalate? He's already got them tied up and bound and gagged, torturing them in a chamber, a sex chamber downstairs, underground. What can you escalate beyond that?
You could escalate by really killing more often and actually playing with corpses. And he's such a great example of the kind of control that they need.
Caryn, did you have to say that? Did you
No
have to
emotion.
say playing with corpses? Yes, you did. And I know who you're talking about. You're talking about Theodore, a.k.a. Ted Bundy, the one-time law student who escalated, as you're saying. Wow, he looks like surprised, like, why am I here? It escalated, just as you're saying, and interesting, Caryn Stark, his MO, modus operandi, method of operation, changed. But in the end, he was escalating it in his own way. He had to kill more often. He had to kill in shorter intervals. And he would, as opposed to stalking and tricking his victims, like he would walk around with a fake arm bandage on, like he broke his arm and asked for help, it got to basically clubbing a little girl, 12 or 13-year-old little girl that he saw on the side of the road taking a walk. the MOs changed drastically and escalated. The intervals lessened, and he became much more, let me just say, rudimentary in the killing, much less thought in it. And back to your point, then he would, as you said, play. Well, that's a euphemism, isn't it, Caryn Stark? He would have sex with their body parts and masturbate onto their dead bodies. He would take their dead bodies and apply makeup and do their hair and bathe their bodies. Yes, I guess that's what you meant by escalate, something like that.
That's exactly right. I mean, think about him. He actually would decapitate a lot of his victims and take the head and bring it home for the sole purpose of reenacting this and keeping it alive as long as possible. And you have to keep in mind that they don't have empathy. They have no emotions. And so they enjoy the torture, just like human. They enjoy keeping victims alive, and even to the point where they're necrophiliac, where they have sex with dead bodies, put makeup on. They keep it going. They have to satisfy themselves.
Can I just hold that thought for a moment? I don't really want to, but when you said putting makeup on the dead bodies and prolonging the experience, let that sink in, Caryn Stark, just one moment, okay? So you've stalked your female victim, you have sex assaulted her, you murder her, then you take her dead body and bathe it and dress it up and apply makeup and do her hair. Let me just get that image in my head, because you know what? When we gloss over these facts, it's just so easy to, just recite them by rote. But I would make a jury think about it. Think about after he strangles them with his own hands, watching their face turn purple, their eyes bulging, their tongue engorged as blood is caught in their head, leaving ligature or manual strangulation marks on their necks as they breathe their last, probably looking right into his face. Then the body becomes a toy where he bathes it, addresses it, masturbates on it, does the person's hair and makeup. Just think of Ted Bundy putting on your lipstick, Caryn Stark, your eyeliner, fluffing your hair. Hold that thought just a moment. That's what I'm talking about. Scary, right?
That is exactly what we find in serial killers, and a lot of them, Nancy, they are incredible. They're smart, like Ted Bundy. He was very, very bright. He could maneuver and manipulate people. He would pose as somebody who was injured and act like he needed help. He would actually identify victims who seemed like they were more vulnerable, like that little girl. And by the way, that little girl did not fit his profile, and he did that just so that he could mislead the police and have them confused about who's doing this and why and what are they looking for. He was that smart, and they're able to have dual identities. Like Huerman, he was an architect. He seemed, quirky, a little bit of a misfit. And Bundy, he was in law school. He volunteered on a hotline for suicides, coming across as someone who really was compassionate, caring. They are able to have dual identities, present themselves in different ways to the world, which is why people are so concerned about the fact that there might be a serial killer, because you need to be very, very cautious, not be out alone at
You were
night.
talking about how intelligent they can be. That shot I'm showing you of Rex Huerman, there's a million shots, but I like this shot because it shows him in a three-piece suit, and he's actually standing in that area of Manhattan I was talking about, but that's in front of a construction site where he had been working on one of his jobs. So here he is at the height of his success during the day, but at night he would go, as you and I have been many, many times, to Penn Station, and he would catch the train out to his home. His home, miles away. Oh, there he's going all Kim K on me and taking a selfie. And that is where he lived with his wife and her children and the sex dungeon downstairs. Now, Caryn Stark, doesn't that seem inconsistent? Going out to the suburbs, beautiful area, with your wife and children and a sex torture dungeon downstairs. Doesn't fit together, does it?
Well, that's the point, Nancy. It doesn't fit together to us because we would never do that. But they're able to compartmentalize. So many times they have a significant other. They have children who would never know. Think of Dennis Radar, who would never know that their dad is a killer, a murderer living right
Oh
under the
gosh,
same.
yes. Dennis Rader, BTK, Mind Torture Kill, that's a great example about the dichotomy of the mind of a serial killer. He was not only a family man with a wife and children, his daughter is amazing, by the way, but
No,
he was a church deacon, and this is kind of a tip-off, he's a dog catcher. Who wants to spend their life running around catching dogs and euthanizing them? He did. But in his other life, he was along his dog catcher route, spotting victims. He killed grown women, he killed children, all of a sex nature, while upholding the image of a family man church deacon. Then he went on to outsmart police and taunt them with letters to local news outlets, but they still couldn't catch him. Serial killer, family man, church deacon by day, serial killer at night, much like Rex Heuermann, which takes me back to the New England serial killer, where authorities continue to say there's no such thing. Caryn Stark, since you and I talked last about the so-called New England serial killer, we were talking about 8 bodies. One of those cases was solved, which reduced it down to 7 bodies. But now that number has soared to 12 bodies. Between March and April of this year, authorities in Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Massachusetts have found 12 sets of human remains. Although law enforcement is quick to point out there is, quote, no connection. But they don't even have, Caryn Stark, a COD, cause of death, on a lot of these bodies. So how do they know they're not connected?
this is another instance, Nancy, where they are afraid of hysteria. They really don't want people to be frightened. They don't want them to assume that something is happening, and they're trying to keep it under control. But on the other hand, there are ex-police detectives and people involved who are saying to the women, be very, very cautious, because this very well could be. Think about it. They're clustered. They're all in New England, a place where actually serial killers have not been found sometime. And so I think that people have the right to be frightened. They need to be careful.
I'm very curious that this many bodies have been found in such a short amount of time over a period of just months. I'm looking for a connection. Are they all women of a certain race, of a certain age? Occasionally, like with the Long Island serial killer, we found a little baby, an infant, a tot, as a murder victim. That tot
And
was
man,
connected
who was
to,
a man,
yes,
a joke.
yes, yes, a man. So that proves, Caryn Stark, that your victims don't all have to be female or any one particular thing, because serial killers will kill whoever they have to kill in order to get to the target they want, be it a man or be it the target's child. So I'm not moved by the fact that all of these victims, who have not all been identified, by the way. So We don't know what they have in connection or their similarities. But I'm not impressed by the fact that one may be a man, or in Rex Heuermann's case, allegedly one is a child and one is a man. Explain that.
Because they don't have to be that organized, Nancy. I mean, what they're looking for is the thrill, the control, the ability to have power over someone else and fulfill a fantasy. So it could be men, it could be women, it could be a child, like we said. They just need to be able to kill. And I think it's really interesting that it starts off with 7 and now all of a sudden it's 12, as though someone is out there and taunting authorities, right? Like, oh, you think there's not a serial killer? Well, here's another one, and here's another one. It's very suspicious.
I'm also curious why law enforcement is taking such great pains to deny there's a serial killer. I think that to be safe, they need to alert the public that there's a possibility, not a probability, but a possibility. I was speaking to the lone survivor of the Connecticut River Valley serial killer, who has never been caught, by the way, responsible for many, many murders. She survived, and she is outraged that people aren't being warned. Not that there is a serial killer, but that there is a chance there's a serial killer, so people can get serious about their own protection. I find that derelict in duty.
That's the point, Nancy. That's why we're talking about it, isn't it? Because I do believe, how can it be harmful for people to be extremely cautious? You need to be in pairs, be with a friend, think about where you are, be aware of think about somebody like Ted Bundy who's looking for vulnerability, right? And thinks he can spot his victims because he knows he can get away with doing whatever he wants. So, what is wrong with letting people know that they need to be aware? It's really important.
You know, Caryn, another case similar to this I'd like your thoughts on is the Ladybird Lake killings out in Texas, where now there are 20 plus victims, all associated with the area surrounding Lady Bird Lake. 20 plus bodies found in just a handful of years. Now, a lot of these deaths are being blamed on, quote, accidents. That's a lot of accidents for just one very small area that only spans blocks. Doesn't that concern you? I mean, I don't
Yeah.
understand the reluctance to put it out there. There could be a repeat killer, a serial killer in this area. Be careful. It's typically males that go to an entertainment area along near Ladybird Lake and they end up dead. Now, I find that very, very disturbing. Same thing here. We now have 20 bodies. Are they connected? So I want to hear your thoughts on the Ladybird Lake killer. Now, in those killings, in those cases, most of the victims are men.
Well, like we said, right, it doesn't have to be just women. I mean, there have been other serial killers who targeted boys and men, not just women. And so you have to think about the fact that this is a cluster. It's happening in an area, in this one lake area. And that's how serial killers work most of the time. I mean, Ted Bundy, he went across the country, but that isn't, it's usually more like Herman, like they're in the same area and they keep going back to the same places. They need that familiarity and you can spot them that way. AI is becoming very proficient, actually, at looking at those scenes and determining what's going on. So, again, why shouldn't people know that there is a problem? Why shouldn't men be careful? Why shouldn't the women be careful? It's just,
Well, I mean, there's
will they
Jeff
get
Dahmer. That's a
hysterical?
great
Yeah.
example of serial killers targeting men. I mean, there's so many. We had a case that was in Canada that we examined where the serial killer was a landscaper and he would bury victims and body parts in his clients on his client's property all over. It's very hard to find them. They finally looked back at all of his jobs and found a lot of the victims. Dahmer only attacked that we know of young males and would actually eat them. He was cannibal. But speaking of Ted Bundy and why he was crossing jurisdictions, he was on the run. He had been apprehended not once but twice and escaped twice. Once
Yes,
from a
yeah.
county jail and once from a courthouse, which is, a very soft target, very easy to get away in a courthouse. I mean, think back on the Fulton County serial killer who was in on a rape charge. He overpowered a lady sheriff in the security elevator, killed her, my friend, Judge Roland Barnes, my friend, the court reporter Julie, and more before he went on a murder spree once he got out of the courthouse. So courthouses are easy targets. Law libraries in courthouses, easy targets. But that's why Bundy crossed the country. He was on the run not once but twice. And the jurisdictions were not communicating with each other, which is another problem here in the New England serial killer case. It's spread across multiple states, and they are not sharing information. I guess they are now. Caryn, it's a shame where people that are concerned have to go to an online New England serial killer website on Facebook to get information. That is just wrong, Caryn Stark.
And that's exactly what's happening, Nancy. That's how people are communicating with each other and trying to warn each other that this might be happening and speculating. And it's because they don't have information. The police are withholding everything from the public. And so they're taking it, these days you could take it upon yourself. You can go online, you could go to Facebook or Instagram and start talking about what's happening around you.
Of course, you have to take everything you read online with not just a pinch, but a box of salt. Anyone could be online posting. We don't know if any of it is true or can be verified, and I understand LA law enforcement's frustration with that. But that said, you can't argue with 20 bodies turning up over the course of just a few months. Caryn Stark, you are a renowned psychologist, and I want to get your take on what motivates serial killers. It's not about the sex, it's something else.
It's sometimes sex, Nancy, but it's much more about control, domination, and getting away with what you're doing. The planning, they love the planning and the fantasies. They're not like us. Their fantasies take up much of their time. They're living in their head and imagining what's going to be the next thing that I do. And that is their life. Their life is who's the next target. Think about he buried murder kits all around the country that he could actually use in the future. He was planning ahead of time. That's their life. It's not being an architect or a law student. It's who can I control? Who can I dominate? What can I get away with? What plan can I create to make this happen? That's how they are so different. And they are extremely often charming. They lead those dual lives so they can manipulate, it's misleading. And Ted Bundy, he got people to really care about him. He had women fall in love with him. He was very, very good at coming across as your wonderful, charming next door neighbor. And that happens frequently. That's part of the fun for them, is that you won't know who they really are. They are able to deceive you. That's just the most exciting thing that they could think of, beside actually killing and controlling and torturing their victims.
Well, it's clear that New England authorities are not sharing enough information now that the body count has been raised from 8 to 12 bodies. And these bodies have been found in just the space of a few months, since March, April, May. That's very disturbing. Also, Caryn Stark, we are learning that the ages of the remains, I don't mean the age of the victims, but how long the remains have been in their locations, their discovery locations, are different. One skull had turned green over time, so it had been there for a period of months. Others, one victim had just died. A female victim had just died when she was found. What does that tell you?
Well, if there is a serial killer, Nancy, which it seems like there might be, they're having a really good time playing around with this, which doesn't surprise me, right? We talked about how they plan, how they love to deceive. So they're going to have some skull there for a long period of time, then a fresh kill, then they're going to put them in different places, different people. And the whole time, if there is a serial killer, they are enjoying this hide and seek, this game that they play with authorities. That's what their life is
Remains
really
have been
about.
located in New Haven, Norwalk, Groton, Killingly, Rocky Hill. It goes on Foster, Pawtucket in Rhode Island, Framingham, Plymouth, Springfield, two additional bodies in Massachusetts. Particularly the remains of female remains in three neighboring states suggest to many that there is a serial killer. But as you and I have pointed out, there can be men, even children, involved with the same serial killer. Why do you believe that authorities are so insistent there is not an SK?
I think that it's a combination, Nancy. After a while, they get immune to the whole idea of serial killing because they're used to working with individual cases. They're not used to that kind of cooperation that we're talking about. And I do really think that they worry about the kind of hysteria that could happen, possibly, if people really think that there's a serial killer. They're not thinking about safety. They're actually thinking about, let's keep this away from the public, even in terms of clues. You know, if there is a serial killer out there, they don't want people to know the specifics so that if they find the person, only that person would know and they would know. So I think there are a number of factors for why they're withholding it. But as we said, I don't know if that's wise because people need to be aware that there is a possibility and protect themselves.
You know, Caryn, the Facebook site New England Serial Killer has over 70,000 followers. That's a lot of people wanting information. What do you believe would connect cases to one killer?
I think that it really seems like you can find some kind of pattern if only they would actually let other agencies work with other agencies. And, you know, a lot of times that the people that are online that are looking into this, the people that are into crime, they're very good sleuths and detectives. And they could help figure things out, including AI, if they would put it out there and make some kind of a connection because you are looking at a cluster that's happening only right now in New England. And so it's happening in an area which would make you think that there is somebody out there who is choosing these sites. And also the fact that now we have two more. So it doesn't surprise me because I feel I could be wrong, but that there's somebody who's enjoying every minute of this, including the fact that we are talking about it right now. Because if there is a serial killer, they are watching you, Nancy, and they are enjoying any attention they could get from the public and the media.
Caryn Stark, can we just cut the chase and ID if there is a New England serial killer? He's obviously going to be a white male who has access and knowledge of the disposal sites of all of these victims, which we think are largely female. It would help a lot to know the COD, causes of death, but we don't. That has been kept secret. If you had to profile him, what would be your profile at this very, very preliminary juncture?
Well, like you said, it's a white male that we find most of the time, very rare. Um, to find somebody that isn't white, although there is one instance, right? And I think it would be
There are
somebody.
several, but the victims that we know of, we've been told that they are white. So,
Exactly.
statistically, not all of them, but the majority of them is what we've been told so far. And very rarely do you see a serial killer kill outside his own race. That's where I'm getting white male. And of course, it's not a woman, statistically, not going to happen. That's where I'm getting white
Yeah,
male.
there are
But from
women, but
that
this
point
doesn't
on,
fit the profile. Excuse me?
and like Huerman and Bundy, I would say they may be fairly intelligent, with an enjoyment of taunting people like BTK.
And also taunting the authorities. Think about that. I mean, they had there's a skull, there's a recent kill. There are now two more bodies when the police are still saying, okay, there's no serial killer. We don't believe it's connected. So, as in the case of most serial killers, this man is enjoying it. So he's smart, he's creative, he's crafty, and must be leading some kind of a dual life because he's not out there advertising that he's a serial killer. Nobody's turning in anybody. So he could be your next door neighbor. He could be the owner of the business that you go to and somebody who lives in that area, in the New England area for sure.
Well, Caryn Stark, we haven't managed to narrow it down very much, but as we get more information, I believe you will. Is there a New England serial killer? Joining us, renowned psychologist Caryn Stark. Caryn, thank you. Please join us on our mission to find missing people, especially children, to solve unsolved homicides. If you're on the go, catch us on your favorite podcast app where you can get all of our content where we, in our own way, seek justice.